Susie Homesteader of the Rockies, and welcome to the Susie Homesteader channel. And this is going to be part one of our above ground pool series. And what we'll talk about first is, of course, the location that you're going to put your above ground pool in, which is always the most important way to start. So there's a couple different things you can do to set your pool up. You can pour a concrete pad, which is the most level area that you could get, which is probably your best idea. You can build a sandbox, which is what I did, and I'll show you that in a second. Or if you have a really nice level grass lawn somewhere, where maybe you just need a couple of blocks or a few shims or just some 1-inch boards or something to adjust your feet, you could do something like that. So what I will show you is how I did this, and the reason I chose to do a big giant sandbox is only just because I had a very sloped piece of area that I was setting my pool up. So mine went from about a 6-inch high board on one side to almost 4 feet high on the other side. So that's how big of a grade I had to work with. And I chose not to excavate the area and turn it into a flat pad just because it was too much dirt work. So instead I built a giant sandbox, which is kind of what I wanted anyway. And what I started with was just digging my holes for my 6x6 posts, treated posts, and pouring some concrete and setting those posts in the concrete. And then using some treated, you know, like 2x12 boards or whatever height of the board you need, and then staining that, which at this point the stain's kind of worn off, but you definitely want to get the stain on there, especially if you don't buy the treated boards, which of course are a lot more expensive. So get your holes poured, get your posts set, put your boards on, and then what you can do is start with maybe a layer of Visqueen on the bottom, which is what I did, but you don't really need that if you have a lot of dirt that you're putting on there. You'd only need that if it's just a very shallow area that the weeds might actually come through. But I did put some Visqueen down on my base before I brought in my materials. And I also set up some drain pipe in there just so that I could ensure that anything that came down the top of my hill bypassed the sandbox and continued out through the lower section of my sandbox. So Visqueen, some drain pipe, and then since my box was such a giant project, I actually just used about 3/4 of the bottom of this sandbox with fill dirt instead of the sand, because the sand is more expensive. And of course out here in the Rockies I'm not actually going to get beach sand anyway, so I had to use some creek bed sand, which is nice, but it does contain rocks, you know, and some sharper objects than you're going to get from beach sand, but it's also a lot less expensive. So if you have beach sand available, great. If not, use a creek bed sand. And anyway, I used about the last 1/4 to 1/3 of my box with this finer sand so that we weren't walking on top of the fill dirt. So that's how I did it. And then I spent about a week trying to compact my materials. And regular sand is about 100% compactable, but the materials that I used is not. And so therefore I set a sprinkler on it for about a week every day. Then I had the kids come out and put the hose on it. I let it rain, you know, anything you can do to get those materials compacted before you set up your pool. So super important to make sure you do, because there's so much settling with this pool, and then draining your pool, and then the weather and all kinds of things that are going to absolutely change how level your pool is. So whatever your area is, all I can tell you is just make sure that it's really settled before you set up your pool. So let's get on to actually setting up the pool. So now that you have your area ready to go, get your manual out that comes with the pool. This was a 22 by 52 inch Intex Walmart pool. I think I paid about 700 bucks for it. It's the vinyl wall, and it holds about 10,500 gallons of water. So not a small pool. And so my sandbox, I made about a 26 by 26 foot area, just so that I had some room to walk around this size pool. So it's a really easy pool to set up, I will tell you that. The instructions are simple. You get your frame set up and you get the vinyl put on there in a real specific order, which is great because they tell you how to do all that. But what they don't tell you, of course, is that you're probably going to have to invest in some blocks, unless, like I said, you have a concrete pad. So you can get any kind of blocks you need, any size. Here's an example of just a few different sizes you can get. This is most likely going to be the size you want, but you can buy something more like this, but just half of that size, because you really don't need it this wide. You only need about half of this width for a shorter block. So, you know, 50, 60 bucks in blocks, get different sizes and different heights. And then you might also want to get some of your scrap lumber, like some 1-inch boards or 2-inch scrap lumber that you have, because if you want to be real specific about leveling this, then you might just be off by like 1 inch or 2 in some areas. So here's how it goes. So what I would do is just start by putting your pool where you think you need it. If you see some really low spots that you know you're going to need some blocks under, go ahead and start putting them in. Do not put them right up smack against the vinyl, because what's going to happen is as this fills up with water, your vinyl walls are going to start popping out. So, oh, and you also, they'll give you a tarp too to put underneath your pool before you set it up. But I have to say, this is really worthless, because if there really was a sharp object that was going to poke through your pool, this would not really help you out much. So ideally, I would buy a second tarp or just a thicker tarp than the one that they give you, because this one's kind of worthless. But it did work out in my case, because with the blocks, what I did is made sure that this was covering the sharp corners of the blocks. So that way, if for some reason this does bow out and hit your corners, it's not so sharp. So try and make it so you have a little extra all the way around your tarp to be able to cover up these blocks if you have to use the blocks. So anyway, you're going to fill this up about 1/3 of the way, maybe, well, even less than that, about 1/4 of the way. And do not fill your pool up the whole way until you have your feet adjusted. And I'll tell you why, because it's pretty simple. By the time you start getting all that weight on the bottom here from the water, you can't even budge these feet or these blocks if it's completely full. I mean, it's not going anywhere. So unless you want to bend the frame by trying to move this later, I wouldn't suggest that. So start filling up your pool and start paying attention to the walls here and how they're going to start bowing out. So get your blocks, and you're probably 99% chance going to have to start pulling them away from the pool, and even maybe another inch beyond that, because by the time it gets to the top, the water gets to the top, it still continues to bow out. So I learned that one the hard way, where I had to drain the pool at least, you know, half the way, and go back and pull my blocks out, and then actually pull the feet out a little bit too. So it's pretty hard to tell how close to set these blocks and the feet right off the bat, and you really can't tell until you see how this water shifts and it pushes out the walls. So get that set up, get that ready to go, so you can continue to fill up the pool all the way. But before it does fill up, again, go get your level, okay, and find the most level spot you have, or where you think you might have on your pool. Boy, and that's pretty darn level right there. And then just work your way around the entire pool with your level, and start adjusting your blocks or your little shims or pieces of wood or whatever you got, so that eventually you wind up with this whole rim of the pool pretty close to level. And you know, it will not stay that way, because again, things are going to shift, you know, with the weather and splashing and water, you know, getting underneath your blocks. So just start out as level as you can, because it will not stay that way. So there you go. That's how you're going to start getting your pool filled up. But I can't tell you enough, don't fill it up the whole way until you got the bottom exactly where you want it. Otherwise, you're going to have to drain it and start all over. So there you go. There is the beginning of getting your pool set up. And next, we're going to talk about how to start maintaining your pool and using your filters and your pumps. So we'll see you on the next video and answer any of the questions you might have. We'll see you there. Bye-bye. get started, subscribe to the Susie Homesteader channel, and we'll see you there. Bye-bye.